Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This episode is another retrospective on an anime series that has had a unique cultural impact, or is of unique cultural relevance in Canada. This time we're going to be talking about another anime that had an impact in French-speaking Canada, but is pretty much unknown in English-speaking Canada. It's called Candy Candy, or as it is known across the French-speaking world, Candy. I don't know why they had to cut the other Candy, and for that matter, I don't know why they had to square Candy to begin with. That never really made sense to me. Candy Candy, the 70s shoujo phenomenon, it took the entire world by storm, except for the places where people spoke English. And joining me today are three folks who are highly qualified in the field of Candy Candy. Joining us again, always great to have Chris on the show, who gives us the extremely important and extremely valuable Francophone perspective on this. Chris, can you give a quick introduction to yourself?
Hey, hi, my name is Chris. I am, as Jesse mentioned, I watched a lot of anime in French. I recently started a podcast about anime music, because that's what I really love. So, do check it out.
What's it called?
It's called Anisong Talk.
Anisong Talk. And you know, you're really into idols. You make You make the occasional trip to Japan to catch musical performances.
Yeah. I do go to Japan. I don't want to say often, but I do go often to go catch Anisong concerts. So that's also one of the reasons why I started my podcast, because I want to spread the love.
You have a lot to say on it. We missed each other by like 2 days in Japan this year, which is unfortunate.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, right. So also joining us is Dave Merrill, who has been on the show quite a few times before now. Dave?
Hello, everybody. I'm Dave. I'm one of these anime nerds that has been watching Japanese cartoons since I was a wee tot, and I'm just obsessed with the gosh darn things. Somebody help me.
And joining us for the first time is Shaindle Minook. You may have seen her on Twitter. She has there's a Candy Candy Matsuri mask on some kind of statue.
It's a little ceramic dog, and he's wearing a little medallion that says, give me love or something like that.
Candy Candy is the progenitor of so much wonderful janky merchandise from the 1970s. I don't think it's hard to get a lot of it now, even if you're in Japan. But man, when you stumble on that stuff, it is wonderful. And Candy Candy was a franchise that was just a treasure trove for that kind of thing. It was one of the big 70s shoujo phenomenon, or at least of the late 70s for sure, especially with younger girls at that time. If you're not familiar with Candy Candy, it is the story of Candace White Adley, or as she's known in French, Candace Snow Andre.
Snow Andre.
Snow Andre.
Well, it's actually Candy Neige, but yeah.
Oh, it's Candy Neige. Oh, okay.
Candy Neige, yes.
Candy, that makes more sense. Candy Neige. Yes. I guess the resources I was looking at, I guess, were auto-translating. So, Chris, you'll have to step in and correct me on many things we're going to be discussing in this podcast today. She's a blonde-haired, freckled orphan who is very good with a lasso. She finds herself adopted into a wealthy family, and she faces she constantly faces horrible tragedy for every good thing that happens in her life, as was the style of many shows at that time.
No good deeds goes unpunished.
And I saw on YouTube someone actually graphed out like throughout the course of the story every good thing that happens with Candy and the proportional tragedy that immediately follows it every single time, and it just goes up and down, up and down. But yeah, that's pretty much the basic idea behind Candy Candy. It was a cultural touchstone in Japan when it came out in the late 70s. It's a merchandising phenomenon, and was also the same in most countries around the world, including Canada, but only the French-speaking portion. The anime, the French adaptation of the anime, actually was a Quebec production, one of only a handful of anime that was dubbed in Quebec. There was a French version as well, but we'll get into that. And most interestingly, Candy Candy has not seen the light of day in any legal capacity since 1998 due to a legal dispute between the creators. So all of Candy Candy is fan sub. You can watch it all, but any version of the show you find looks like complete garbage because it is taken from some kind of source that was released or broadcast before 1998. Only a handful of random episodes of Candy Candy were released on VHS in Japan, and anything else is usually either sourced from an old television broadcast, I think usually from like reruns on TV Osaka or something, or taken from bootleg DVDs, which are the only DVDs you can get of Candy Candy because it never had any actual DVD release or any digital release. And I think even some of the episodes floating around there are just like direct telecine rips that someone was able to smuggle out, or someone who had access to the masters was able to smuggle out. But you can get all 115 episodes, which is kind of a miracle, frankly, given the circumstances. And I can say I actually watched all 115 episodes of this on my cell phone during my commutes and on a couple of plane rides over the course of a few months. And even on my cell phone, a tiny screen, it's still every episode looked like total garbage.
Our copies came from a gray market Korean.
Was it Korean?
I think it's a Korean DVD set that we have.
Wow.
And I know that that's been available. If you go to the various Chinatowns in the cities, you might see one or two kicking around still these days. It's worth keeping an eye out for. I don't really generally support the purchase of gray market merchandise, but...
Well, sometimes you have no choice.
Yeah. I believe both of the Manga Matsuri short films got some sort of VHS release.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we have.
Yeah, and there's a 1990 short film that Toei made, that's sort of a updating of one of the stories. But it's, half an hour, so it's basically a TV episode.
My opinion, it's probably better to torrent this stuff. Like it would be better to torrent the bootlegged DVDs than to purchase it, because at least that way people aren't making you're not directly supporting any kind of shady business.
Yeah, that's true.
With money. But
I will say I had a coworker who was she's a Japanese woman who grew up in Canada, but her parents kind of wanted to make sure she had Japanese language skills and enjoyed Japanese pop culture. And she's about our age. And Candy Candy was a big influence on her life. Everybody that's kind of our age, and is a woman and, had access to a television in the 70s, I think is probably still is a big Candy Candy fan. So I think that explains why you're seeing so many of the episodes on YouTube, or generally, this is something that should not be available, and yet it is available. And it's because people love it and they want to see it.
Think how much money they'd be making if it wasn't for this copyright dispute.
Oh man, they're leaving so much money on the table.
And we'll get into this more in detail later, I'm sure, but the copyright dispute's been pretty much settled, but everyone's just kind of afraid to reopen the Candy Candy Pandora's box. I don't know. It's a weird situation, for sure.
I don't know if I mentioned this to you. We were out west. We were actually in Vancouver driving down to Portland. We stopped off at an antique mall in upstate Washington State. And, as we do, we dig through antique malls. And they had a children's sewing machine that had an image of Candy Candy on it.
I don't think it was.
Wow.
I think it was Candy Candy.
Was this in Bellingham?
No, it wasn't. It was like not near a city at all. It was like some super small town.
Okay, because I went to this great vintage store in Bellingham, and they had like this. It was a Space Adventure Cobra slot machine.
Patch a slot, yeah.
At
the problem is you see this stuff and you're not driving, so you can't take the big stuff home with you. If I was driving, it's like, oh yeah, that's coming home with me, but you're flying, so it's like I can't buy another airplane seat just for my Golgo 13 pachinko machine.
Now you're making me feel bad for not picking that stuff up, because I drove down there. Yeah. But anyway, point is, Candy Candy was just everywhere for almost 20 years, and now it's just gone. The only way you could watch it are these janky fan subs that, for some reason, default to Romanian when you watch them, and you have to manually go in and change it to English because the English-speaking audience is so irrelevant for Candy Candy.
That's brilliant.
Even more so today. That was my experience with every single one of these files I had. That's just the version I got, at least. But I do not regret that experience at all, because Candy Candy, I think, is without question one of the best anime of the 1970s, and I cannot recommend anything less than watching every single episode for yourself. In fact, I think you should, if you haven't done it, if you've been putting off watching Candy or haven't considered it, I'd say go do it now.
I feel like if you're going to call yourself an anime fan, this is something that you need to have in your education. This is vital.
It is old looking. It is cheaply animated even for its time. It is unapologetically for children and for young girls specifically. And I think those are things that will put people off of the show. But after watching the whole thing, I really feel that all of those things are actually its strengths.
I actually wonder how much Candy actually shaped the current state of shoujo manga. Because you find a lot of tropes in there that I see nowadays.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, it did for sure. Yeah, there's no question. It was a huge influence. Not that I have anything to back that up, but I'm sure it's.
I don't think I could.
When you look at the shoujo manga that was happening in 1973, 74, 75, it was still. I don't want to say like there were historical shoujo manga, but there wasn't anything that had that sweep to it. And it really, I mean, the sweep of the American sort of I don't want to say the Wild West, but there's still this.
There were some, but like, a lot of shoujo manga, they were sports manga, or, there was some sort of learning to be an actress or a tennis player or something like that.
Yeah, it was very situated in this extremely Japanese school environment.
Yeah.
And Candy made this sort of gutsy move, like, no, we're going to put this in Indiana, and we're going to put this at the turn of the century, and at a time and a place that many Japanese kids might not know anything about.
Well, she was really influenced by like Anne of Green Gables, and I think Little House on the Prairie. That was like getting big when the manga started.
Right. Yeah.
It was Candy was very much in the spirit of World Masterpiece Theater.
Yeah,
I believe it started on TV at that point.
Yeah.
So it was very much in that spirit, and it kind of intersects it with, a lot of shoujo manga focused on class issues, or at least rich people. And it has, I think it creates kind of an interesting intersection there.
What was, I want to say Prairie Girl Laura might have still been on the air when Candy started.
Oh my God, wow.
Around the same time.
Yeah, like 74, 75, 76.
That sounds about right. But yeah, it's definitely part of a trend, and I think despite that, was still influential in a lot of ways. And again, I think you'll understand a lot of what we mean, even if you're not convinced by what we say about how impactful this show was. I think when you see it, you'll get it. But before we get into like more of the background on Candy, I want to know a little more about everyone's personal experience with Candy and how you kind of came into the show. I've already given mine. For me, Candy was I'd always just known of it as this anime that showed on Radio Canada. In the French CBC, and I didn't really know anything about it beyond that context, because of course at the time I was getting into anime, Candy was in limbo, so it was just something that was not really on anyone's radar anymore at that point. But we'll start with Chris, because I think you watched it on TV as a kid, right? It was still rerunning well into the 90s on Radio Canada.
Yeah, but actually, because I wasn't Benin when I started watching it. I watched the French dub, but I watched so I found this out when you told me the other day. I didn't know, because to me that was the only version that existed. So essentially, basically, the French dub, they changed something that happens to a character.
Yeah.
Where
an important thing that happened.
You know what? I think we should. Spoiler alert! I think it's going to be impossible for us to really get into this without spoiling one major thing that happens early in the series. And this goes into like how the dubs played out. Around episode 24, the character Anthony dies horribly and shockingly, and it is a traumatizing moment that...
Look, that horse, it's traumatizing because the horse puts his foot right in the bear trap.
It is not telegraphed at all.
Yeah, you do not know it's coming.
Yeah.
At no point do you think, oh, well, something bad's going to happen. No, it's out of nowhere.
Sometimes it's so
I disagree. Sorry, Shaindle, but I was going to say, I disagree. This is actually hilariously telegraphed in the show leading up to it.
There's foreshadowing.
There is
foreshadowing. Yeah, there's all the foreshadowing, yeah.
But despite that foreshadowing, it is still absolutely shocking when it happens. And this is something that seriously disrupted the French version. But I think, Chris will share his experience with that.
But yeah, so I watched it when I was like 9, and you know, when you're a kid, you watch shows. Sometimes you don't question things. So in the French version that I watched, he doesn't die. He just had a terrible accident, and that could leave him paralyzed. You know, so you don't ever see him again. Besides when Candy has flashbacks of him and the accident, and you know, yes. If you're watching it with an adult eyes, now you know he's definitely dead. But as a kid, you just don't question it.
You were successfully fooled into believing that Anthony was just in the hospital.
I believed he was in the hospital.
Well, and if you haven't seen it already, then it's easy to think that it's like, well, eventually we'll see him again. And then you just kind of forget about it. It's like, you know, we never did see him again.
He's lying there in the hospital. Why won't they visit? Yeah. Somebody visit me.
Yeah, just like how we never saw Franny again. She just
that's right.
Yeah.
They wrote her out. I don't believe she added. She did what she needed to do.
Well, yeah, I don't think that there was any, like, she didn't definitively die even in the manga.
No.
But you just never see her again.
Yeah. But I mean, she went to the front line, so.
And honestly, I thought that's where the show was going to go.
Me too.
I thought Candy was going to go to the front lines, the Western Front in France.
Yeah, I thought that's what.
Yeah.
And they just dodged it. They said, nope, not going there. It was fascinating.
Sorry, Chris. Sorry, we went on a little tangent there, which will probably keep happening. But sorry, go on.
So I watched that version, which was very interesting. And one of the things I used to do with it was one of the shows I used to watch with my grandmother. So religiously every day, because it would air like around noon, and usually at noon we would get a break from school. So usually kids go back home to eat, and that was when Candy was airing.
Oh.
So I would always watch it with my grandmother. I have this very fond memory of the show, even though it's the Suffering Olympics, because I was watching it with my grandmother.
That's a very nice memory. That's really nice.
Yeah. And I know that there's some anime that you came back to watch later on, like the Mangas channel in France and stuff. Is this something that you went back to later as well?
I did not actually.
Mm-hmm. And how like this was the 90s, so this show had already been running in, you know, it had been running in France and been in other French areas and Quebec all of Canada, because Radio Canada is available across the country. But it ran through the 80s, well into the 90s. There are multiple different versions of the dubs. You watched it yourself. Did you know other kids who watched, kind of what the perception of the show was with others?
Not really, because it was more, I guess, of a girly show back in the days. So other kids wouldn't really say that they used to watch it.
I was gonna ask, like, was there any stigma associated with watching a girl show?
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, as a kid, definitely a girly show. You wouldn't want to say that you watched Candy.
I mean, I knew another French Canadian guy when I was in college, and he watched it, and he just watched it as a matter of course, along with Albator and Goldorak, yeah.
The Holy Trinity.
I think as far as the girly shows are concerned, one of the anime that I watched and that I know that nobody could really escape was Princess Sarah.
Oh, yeah. That was a little later. That was that's a Little Princess, isn't it? I want to say I think so, yeah.
Is that what it's called in English?
I believe so, yeah. It's about a little girl who, if I remember the story, she gets sent to an orphanage.
Yeah.
And
that one's not a Suffering Olympic.
Yeah, it's total suffering. It's based on a Victorian children's book, so of course it's nothing but suffering. I believe that was like the late 80s, that anime. I think it was a little later.
I don't know that I'm familiar with that at all.
You'll recognize it if I show you pictures in the anime mags. It was in a lot of the anime mags.
So, Chris, with Candy, do you know anyone? Do you also know anyone who watched it in like Quebec or French Canada as well?
No, I've asked around and nobody else in my friend circle watched it.
Yeah, but it was rerunning through the 80s. I think early 90s is about when it petered out. I think we didn't get it right through to the cutoff the hard cutoff of 1998. But it was definitely there. It was definitely had an impact. I think I found an ad recently for this was like some kind of felt clothing doll set. I sent you guys. I showed you guys the ad for this. That was is actually for Hello Sandy Bell, but Hello Sandy Bell never aired in Quebec. So I guess they figured they had these toys they had to distribute. So and Candy Candy was still on the air 10 years later. So they figured, oh well. Candy she looks enough like Candy. Let's just throw Candy on there.
They're both blondes. They have freckles.
Yeah.
One of Candy's orphan pals from Pony's Home.
All right. Well, Dave, why don't we get into your background with the show?
Well, in the early 80s when home video was booming in the States, there was a company called Ziv International that released several anime titles on direct-to-home video in English with English dubs. They did there was an infamous Captain Harlock dub they released. They released Captain Future. They released Loon Loon the Flower Angel as just Angel. These were just like 1 or 2 episodes on a tape. That's as much. And they released Candy Candy dubbed in English. So I saw that. I rented it. The dubbing is awful. It's just the first 2 episodes, so you really don't get.
They're not the most compelling episodes.
They're not the most compelling episodes. It takes a little while for the story to really get going. But I'm like, oh, well, that's Candy Candy. Okay, I know what Candy Candy is. And actually, when they started running Honey Honey on CBN, I saw that in the TV listings, and I'm like, maybe this is Candy Candy with a weird dub. But no, it's completely different. But, I knew what Candy Candy was. I knew when that book Manga came out, there's a chapter about shoujo manga, and they're like, oh, well, the Candy Candy is, Yumiko Iragashi, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when I got the chance, this friend of mine named James basically said, here, Dave, here's all of Candy Candy. You need to watch this. And we sat down and
not sure where he got that either.
It's from those same
the gray market.
Yeah. A magical fairy gave it to him. And we sat down and watched Candy Candy and really liked it.
Oh yeah, it's great once you get started.
But it is the kind of thing that you would see merchandise tucked into corners. You would see pictures of it in the anime mags from the 70s. If you're at all trying to dig up anime stuff from the 70s, it's always there. And especially when you're looking at European, you would see ads for European branded Candy Candy toys alongside the Albator stuff. So it was always there. And that's my story. I still have that videotape. I bought the Ziv Candy Candy videotape for $1, maybe $2. Still got it.
And yeah, Ziv usually they picked up quite a few shows. They usually tried to pitch them to Nickelodeon in the States, from what I understand, but they very rarely took.
I don't believe they sold anything that went to series.
Oh, okay.
I believe what they dubbed them. The only thing they released that was a series was Fables of the Green Forest.
Yeah.
And that was shown, that aired here. It did not air in the States.
It aired in
but they
certain
didn't release,
provinces.
Yeah.
Not mine.
They released,
they
released like 4 videotapes of Fables of the Green Forest. They didn't treat it like, here's this TV show, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4. It was like, here's Bobby Raccoon.
Well, I think it's because the stories are episodic.
They're self-contained.
So, yeah.
They're self-contained.
Yeah. When I do the Fables of the Green Forest episode, I will not have to watch every episode like I did for Candy Candy.
Oh, no, you have to watch every episode.
I think I've only seen a couple of episodes of that one.
I'm sure everybody has, yeah.
And Shaindle, your background with Candy Candy?
Yeah, well, I first heard about it, manga and these other, like, early magazine articles about, anime, animation in Japan and this kind of introductory articles that would mention candy as a matter of course. And it looked really interesting to me, and I'm like, well, it's just one of many things I'll never get to see. But when I moved up here, because I was living in the States at the time, but when I moved up to Ontario, it was running, I think it was actually on the French TVO.
Yeah.
So I got to see episodes, but I don't speak French, but I would still watch it because, I don't care. I'll watch unsubtitled Japanese. Why wouldn't I watch French? So I did watch some of it. I only got to watch it sporadically at the time. So that was like pretty much all I got to see of it until Dave got the DVDs from James.
About what year was this when it was airing on TFO?
That would have been the mid-80s.
Mid-80s, okay.
Yeah, and it didn't run for very long. I think it went off a few years later, so I didn't get to see it again. Probably, it was probably a couple years later it stopped running.
Jesse, do you know if Candy Candy aired in its entirety on Radio Canada?
It did, yes. They aired the entire thing. Yeah,
oh, really?
They ran the whole thing over the course of quite a few years. I think there were gaps in the broadcast.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get into that next. It started airing on Radio Canada September 23rd, 1978. It had already debuted in France on Antenna 2 on the 18th, and this was just a few weeks after Goldorak, which was on TVA, but this was on Radio Canada. So these two juggernauts started just within weeks of each other, but on competing stations. And I like to think that Candy, as I kind of touched on before, is like one of the three shows that really made anime an important part of Quebec culture, including Candy, Albator, and Goldorak. But it was also part of another trinity of female-led anime shows that were dubbed in Quebec. The other one, of course, was Anne of Green Gables, the World Masterpiece Theater version a few years later. But there was another one, which we haven't really gotten into much on this show, but it was Sally the Witch. Quebec dub of Sally the Witch, known as Mini Fae. And that started airing 9 years earlier in 1969.
Wow.
And it was actually at this time in 1978, it was still running on Radio Canada. It's a pretty long show. They got their mileage out of it. So
did they air the black and white episodes and the color episodes, or just the color episodes?
From what I understand, they aired the whole thing.
Wow.
Yeah. I gotta look into it a little more, and I am definitely gonna do an episode on Minifae at some point, but
don't remember the black and white episodes, but I know I definitely saw the color episodes on.
Yeah, I think it's possible they didn't run the black and white ones. I gotta dig a little deeper to find that, and it's hard to dig into this stuff because there are language and generational barriers to overcome to get all the information you need to get everything properly documented.
This is why every time you see an old TV guide, you're like, do I need to look at the TV listings in this old TV guide? At least that's what I always think.
Hey, if you subscribe to certain newspapers, you can check out their archives of television listings going way back. So Minifae was actually kind of picked up by chance through a company called Sonolab. They kind of landed on their laps through the distributor that picked it up. Usually dealt with films from Japan for like film festivals or for screenings at that time. They kind of wound up with this show, and the French dub was produced by a woman named Bernadette Morin, who I think from what I have seen, she's a bit of an unsung hero in early anime localization, because she was quite instrumental to the introduction of anime in Quebec. And the thing about Minifae is that this is actually the first non-Osamu Tezuka anime that was distributed anywhere in the world in French. And they dubbed it definitely with the intention of distributing internationally. Because Chris, I know you were watching one of the episodes, and I think we came to the conclusion that though it was dubbed in Quebec, they were definitely trying to make it sound Parisian.
Yes.
That's usually what you do when something's dubbed in Quebec and they want to make it more international friendly. It never was distributed outside of Quebec though.
That's
interesting. The reality was that anime just wasn't big in France at that time. So there wasn't they had some shows, of course, but the phenomenon of the late 70s hadn't hit yet. So the pipeline that we would later see for anime flowing through wasn't in place yet. So Minifae, it only aired in Canada, in French-speaking Canada.
Wow.
So, Bernadette Morin, she started and produced Minifae. She played the main character, and her daughter Amélie Morin was also in the series in a minor role. But now, 10 years later, Candy Candy this was at the time when Toei Animation was really aggressively pushing anime in the European market. And I'm a little short on the details here. I don't know exactly what happened here, but from my understanding, there were two dubs of Candy Candy produced at first. One in Quebec and the other one in France. And that was the case for 26 episodes. So basically, Bernadette Morin, she was in charge of dubbing the first 26 episodes of Candy Candy, which was done by Cinelume in Montreal. And her daughter, Amélie Morin, played Candy. She brought her daughter back to play that role. And this is the version that ran in Quebec. I will say I've done my best to research this. It is possible that the Quebec dub did run in France as well, but the information I've seen have all indicated that was probably not the case. It seems that it was a France-based dub that was running there at the time. So this Quebec dub covered 26 episodes. So right up until like the aftermath of the event we mentioned before, the death of Anthony. And in this dub, Anthony's death was uncensored. That whole thing played out exactly as it did in the original Japanese version. And this was also the case in the version that aired in France. I don't know what the fallout was like in Quebec, but in France, there was a giant scandal over the event that happened with this character's death. Children were shocked and traumatized, as they should have been, by the events that played out in episode 24 of Candy Candy. So much that basically the series was halted. Well, I think they had both only licensed 26 episodes up to that point, but there was kind of a damage control situation that came into play over the next couple of months. And Antenna 2, who was the broadcaster who played Candy Candy, they actually edited together a clip show explaining that everything that had happened in the last 3 episodes of Candy Candy was in fact a dream, and that Anthony was just in the hospital.
Wow.
Wow.
And so after that,
And they complain about Americans rewriting Japanese
I
cartoons.
believe they were the only ones. I feel like there's at least one other European dub that said that he was in the hospital. It might have been Italy or Greece. Well, the Koreans just came up with their own ending, but it was just like a comic.
Okay.
But like I believe maybe Greek or Italy.
Yeah.
Italy, maybe.
They may have just been taking the cues from the French version.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
what I find interesting is that it was initially uncensored, then they had to backtrack and try and obviously this was a traumatizing thing even for French-speaking Canadian children, but I don't think that it was that kind of reaction happened for the broadcast here. But despite that, this sort of resulted in a bit of a shift for the show, and for whatever reason the Quebec version ended after 26 episodes. I originally thought that the Quebec version had aired in both countries, and then they moved production over to France after that to try and keep Antenna 2 happy. That doesn't seem to be what happened when I did further research. If I'm wrong, please feel free to contact and correct me, and I will amend this episode or to get that information out. But anyway, for after episode 26, the France dubbed aired in both French-speaking Canada and in France, and that's the version that ran for many years. A few years later, though, in France, they decided to in the late 80s, they decided to redub a portion of the series that would fix all the events with Anthony's death so that it would be properly restored. I believe they went a little further into the show, but not the whole way, which creates an awkward situation where Anthony's death is restored, but later references to him being in the hospital are still kept intact. So what I'm saying is the French version of Candy Candy is a giant mess, regardless of which version you're watching.
Look, if that happened in the real world, you would want to tell the other kids, no, he's not dead, he's just in the hospital. And some people might know he's actually dead, but they won't tell the other kids.
You would tell the kids if one of their friends died.
Yeah. We sent Fido to a farm upstate.
I mean, you might do that with a pet, but you can't do that with
you can't. No, you can't do that with a kid, no.
That would be psychotic.
It's true.
But it's funny because I was rewatching a clip from a French dub when Candy is explaining to Terry who Anthony is, and in that sentence she uses a past tense to talk about Anthony, which implies he's dead, but then she switches to say, "Oh, but he's in the hospital."
Like they just
you can't see her like her mouth when she says that. Oh, he's in the hospital.
It's very janky.
Yeah. Yes.
It's the opposite of Poochie died on his way back to his home planet.
Notably, in the episodes that they redubbed, it wasn't actually fully the France cast. Amélie Maureen actually reprised who was living in France she had moved to France at that time. She actually reprised her role as Candy in those redubbed episodes that were produced over in France. So again, that kind of creates a bit of a mess with the series. I don't think they've ever made a proper, fully uncut French dub of Candy Candy. It's pretty much always gonna have those flaws. forever. I just thought it was interesting that they would ultimately acknowledge the Quebec dub and bring her in as the voice of the main character for like a good portion of the series.
Has the French version been released on home video?
I don't believe it has officially.
From what I understand, somebody tried to release 2 DVDs recently in 2005. They released 23 episodes, but it was not legal. So they stopped very quickly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was in French.
I believe it was in French, yeah.
There's there have been some sordid tales of bootleg Candy DVDs because people just want it so badly that they just will try and make it materialize, even though the source materials they have access to are not appropriate for DVD at all. For the most part, that is I think that kind of paints the picture of Candy. But Dave, I was hoping that you could maybe tell us a little about, just going back even further, about Candy's background in Japan and just kind of how it all started. I understand it actually started as a novel by one of the creators. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it was a novel in 1970. I want to say before the manga started, there was I guess you'd call it a light novel now. That's my guess. I'm blanking on her name.
Yeah,
the writer's name.
I'm blanking.
Kyoto Mizuki.
Yes, thank you. So Mizuki had this character and had a novel and got together with Igarashi, the artist, and they, did the Candy manga Nakayoshi. And that lasted until 79? Right around the same time as the TV show ended, the manga ended. But that was, a popular manga, in a popular weekly girls magazine. I want to say the Toei anime show started in 1976. So France and Quebec got it not too much longer after its Japanese premiere. But it was it's a big hit in Japan, or it was a big hit. Still is. I think if they patched together their differences and released Candy merch, it would be really popular.
Yeah, it would sell.
And what exactly happened with the whole legal fallout?
I think it was after everything was completed, wasn't it?
The show was over. It was done. I want to say Igarashi wanted to do more Candy, and Mizuki's like, no, you're not going to do any more Candy.
I think she felt the story was over, and the artist wanted to get, and they both felt that, like, the artist felt that she had as much contribution to the creation of the character as the writer did.
It kind of parallels the Leiji Matsumoto, Yoshinobu Nishizaki, Yamato business, where Matsumoto's like, I'm just going to go off and do my own. And Nishizaki's like, oh, no, you don't. Because I believe Igarashi did her own.
She did Georgie Girl.
Yeah.
Or some Georgie.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
And it was basically just warmed over Candy.
It's really similar. Yeah, it's really similar.
Was it called Georgie Girl?
I think it was just Georgie.
Yeah, maybe just I'm thinking of the song.
Lady Georgie, maybe?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know why I'm blanking on it.
It's not based on the name. It's all in my blog. I wrote a whole Let's Anime column about Candy. I did all my research. I wrote it all down. Let's Anime blogspot.com. Do a search for Candy. It's all there. But the deal, the basic gist of the story is Toei would love to do, or at one point in 1990 was like, we're going to do more Candy. But both the writer and the artist were
Toei had a
butting heads against each other. I want to say they sued each other. Igarashi released merchandise she wasn't supposed to release, so they sued her. It got really ugly, and the Japanese are not super happy about lawsuits and
they don't really like scandals.
The scandal of a lawsuit, just everyone's like, okay, fine, we're just not going to do anything. Just nobody. None of you can play nicely, so nobody gets anything. That's basically what they did. And that was years and years and years ago. I know that when we were looking for the stuff the last time we were in Japan, we were seeing some art books that were fairly new, but it was all, Igarashi manga artwork.
Yeah. And she did other manga, so.
I haven't really seen anything. She appears as a minor character in Crusher Joe.
Yeah.
The film Crusher Joe, actually. A lot of manga artists make little cameos in that film. I think she designed a character in that film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, just did a little. It's in that bar scene in the Crusher Joe movie.
All that legal wrangling makes me wonder how they would have reacted to the Hello Sandy Bell merchandise being sold under the guise of Candy Candy.
I gotta say, if they saw what happened to Robotech, they all bet. And this is not like
what a wild time.
There's a giant history of properties being combined, and I mean, you have the show Attack Number One, which is a volleyball show from 1969.
Yeah, I watched it with my grandmother as well.
Yeah, and they took another volleyball show from the 80s called Attacker U, which is by a completely different everything, and said, oh, this is a sequel to Attack Number One. It's like, no, it's got nothing to do with volleyball. Yeah, Attacker U has got nothing to do with Attack Number One, but in certain countries, they're sequels.
Like Robotech.
Okay.
Like Robotech. Or I think the Chinese made their own sequel to Attack Number One. Like
in France, they gave Attacker Number One and Attacker U very distinct, different names, so they couldn't play on the sequel angle.
That's a good idea, yeah, because those two shows are very different. Even though they're both about girls volleyball, they're very different.
Yeah. They're also both ridiculous.
They are ridiculous.
In wonderful, wonderful way.
But it's interesting when you see when you watch Attack Number One and it's all about, I've got to be the best volleyball player, I'm going to work hard and struggle. And then you watch Candy Candy and it's, I've got to learn to be a nurse, I've got to struggle. But there's not that much of that, really.
No, there's not like special training. That's what
there's no special training.
What I was saying about, a lot of the girls' manga was based around learning to do a specific thing, but Candy was more generalized. It was just her life story.
Yeah, she just wants to find out who her prince on the hill is.
She doesn't even, I don't think she even cares about that. I mean, she's curious, but that's not like the golden egg or anything. She's not chasing after anything.
Do we need to go through the general plot? The gist
you know what?
story?
That was my plan was to go through the general story. Maybe we can. I think we should work together on this, because if I sit here pounding out every single plot point of Candy Candy over the course of the story, I am probably going to destroy my throat.
Well, she winds up, she's an orphan. She's left at Miss Pony's home for orphans in LaPorte, Indiana, which is a real town. I don't know if they know that they've been immortalized in a Japanese cartoon in LaPorte, Indiana, but she's found in an orphanage and they name her Candy.
I mean, Candace was like the name pinned to the doll that she was left with. And they name her White because of the snow.
Yeah, in the manga, they name her White because of her white skin, apparently.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, which is, yeah.
Well, she's pretty white.
She is really pale.
Very white.
It's very weird that they find Annie at the exact same time and place, but don't bother giving her a last name.
They don't call her Annie White,
Yeah.
Yeah, Annie doesn't have a last. Annie is shortly later adopted by the Brighton family, which that's something that in the manga it just kind of happens, and it's sad. The anime really ratchets up the melodrama, but it's a sad event because Candy and Annie are they're so close here at Pony's home. And it's not until that she's adopted that Annie actually has a last name. After that point, she's Annie Brighton. And Candy's left at Pony's home just with her raccoon.
Who is not in the manga, by the way.
Yes, the anime-only raccoon character. In, I think, all the fan subs, the raccoon is called Kurin, but the consensus seems to be that his name is supposed to be Clint.
It is Clint. There's an episode much later in the series where there's a man on a train and people are calling him Clint. And she's like, oh, she thought they were calling the raccoon because she's hiding the raccoon.
Yeah. Or you think he was Clinton.
Yeah, it's like,
she's calling Kurin, and she's like, oh, I'm Clinton.
My friends call me Clint sometimes.
What was the raccoon's name in French?
It's Capucin, which is I don't even know how to translate that. It's kind of like a cute name you would give like a child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no debate over that one at all. So yeah, after she's separated from Annie, that's the point where she wanders away from Pony's home, and she meets the Prince on the Hill, who is this very pretty young boy who helps get her back on track by telling her that she's prettier when she smiles. And that seems to have a very profound impact on her life, which is, again, kind of weird. But
telling a girl to smile, it always works.
Always
That
works.
that does not work, by the way. Don't anyone do that.
Yeah.
I believe she was crying because she had just gotten a letter from Annie that said, "I can't write to you anymore."
Yeah.
Annie was told, you can't have any contact with these dirty orphans. You're now a rich
Well,
young
that's
lady.
Annie's story,
Yeah.
but we find out later that's not entirely true.
Yeah.
And then Candy gets adopted herself by the Adley clan, which is a powerful, one of the many, many powerful, wealthy families that populate Indiana. Apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
Apparently that.
Well, she's not initially formally adopted. She's just kind of brought in by the Legan family. Or
As a playmate for the Neil and Eliza, who are the children, who are absolutely terrible, terrible people.
They are the most spoiled, sheltered, cruel, self-enabling pair of shit stains you will ever meet, and they're both they never grow in any way throughout this entire series. They live only to try to destroy Candy's life, to terrorize Candy in every way possible.
Yeah.
Kind of amazing how neither of them have a story arc whatsoever.
It is.
I know.
You're thinking at some point, well, we're going to meet them later and something will have happened to them. It's like, no, they're just still terrible.
No, they stay the same.
Yeah.
And this is actually, it's like the time period this is set in is the early 20th century. And there were actually super wealthy, powerful American families trying to sort of emulate this European class system. They tried really hard and it didn't really work out so well for them, but they tried. When they tried, they really tried.
And as to point out in French, I think it's Legrand is the name of the family.
Legrand.
And Neil is actually, for some reason, he's Daniel in French.
Yes.
Daniel.
But they call him Neil from some.
Neil. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Legrand is an actual name. Legan is not a name. That's not a name that exists.
I'm under the impression, I've always assumed it was meant to be Reagan.
Well, I did too.
And I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I've seen it spelled with the L in the source material.
Yeah.
In the actual source, I think it is an L. Yeah.
So you gotta go with it.
But they have a family emblem that looks like the crest that fell off the Prince on the Hill's kilt. So she thinks that maybe she's getting adopted by that family.
And she does get adopted by the mysterious grandfather William.
So I think that's after she gets sent to. So after after Neil and Eliza try to frame her for stealing, and she gets banished to Mexico, which is apparently a one-day carriage ride away from their home in Indiana.
Well, they get in the carriage, and if you haven't seen the show, they get in the carriage to go ride to the Legan estate in Mexico. And it's like the guy running the wagon is like
he's a Mexican
Mexican stereotype in a big Pancho Villa hat, and he's got it's really, really insulting stereotype. But
it's even worse in the manga because he tries to rape Candy in the manga too.
Yeah, it's
creepy.
But they pass mountains, they go through buttes, they go through Monument Valley. Like if you've ever been to Indiana, you know what Indiana looks like. It's flat. There's a lot of corn. There's not much happening.
There are no mountains.
Tectonically in Indiana. So the landscape you see in the anime Candy has no bearing at all on North American geography. Just want to point this out.
They did a little bit of research into certain things, but this is not an extensively researched franchise.
I believe with Japan, it's kind of the same with European countries. They don't have any idea how big North America is. And I think they think it's like, well, you can take a couple days and drive across the country. It's like, no, it's very big. You will get lost.
You cannot go
People do get lost.
You cannot go from New York City to Miami in a day of driving.
Yeah. They honestly, they have no sense of scale because it's so much bigger than the country that they're living in.
Oh, but we must mention that before Candy was banished to Mexico, she did befriend cousins within
the next door neighbors.
Yeah, next door neighbors.
The estate next door.
Well, I do have the family tree open here. I think they're cousins once removed.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Right, because Eliza, whatever, she thinks that she's gonna marry Anthony or something.
Yeah. They are kissing cousins.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
that's Archie and Alistair and Anthony.
Yeah. Alistair is he's kind of the eccentric inventor. Anthony is the handsome young boy who's starkly reminds Candy of the Prince on the Hill, and he's also the one who she falls in love with. And Archie doesn't really have any notable qualities. He's just kind of there for the whole story.
He kind of wears weird, like
he's like a fancy dresser.
He's a fancy boy.
But yeah, he has less of a personality than the other ones. Yeah, Anthony strongly resembles the boy on the hill. Like she thinks at first that, and this is the other weird thing is you don't really get a sense of time. Like how long after she sees the Prince on the Hill does she see Anthony for the first time?
Yeah. See, that's another thing about Candy is that Candy ages very subtly throughout the series. I think in the manga it's a little more clear cut about how old she is at certain points in the story. But the anime,
I'm never quite clear if she goes through puberty or not. I don't believe she ever does.
I mean, she does eventually.
Yeah, well, everybody's got to, but she always looks 12 or 11.
Yeah. There is one, I think at one point around episode like the late 40s, she suddenly grows about 30%. You suddenly realize that she's taller than
she's
some
taller.
of the other characters.
She gets
it just kind of happens out of nowhere. Maybe it was gradual. I don't know.
I believe it's at a point where you actually see her with young children again.
Yeah.
And it's like, suddenly she's taller than the young children. Okay.
But the passage of time is handled is weird in this show because it just keeps kind of flowing, but they never mention how much time has passed or how many years have passed.
No one really ages.
You can tell it's winter because there will be a scene where Candy is trapped out in the snow trying to struggle down a road in the middle of the snow.
Sure,
winters. Just every winter, yeah.
But there is one character who definitely encapsulates this difficulty in understanding how much time has passed or how old anyone is, and that is Albert, who is a very important, very mysterious character who Candy befriends near the estate.
He saves her from drowning.
He saves her from drowning. So he is supposed to be 17, I believe, at the time that she meets him. But
he's got a hippie beard.
He's got a full beard.
He
looks like a hobo in his late 40s, and he's supposed to be 17. And it's interesting looking back. I think I don't know if this was just sloppy, but it does seem that they kind of play with his age a bit, depending on the role. He has, there are many angles to the relationship that he has with Candy throughout the series, and sometimes, he'll seem much younger than he was before. Sometimes he'll seem much older, and it kind of highlights just the many roles that he plays in her life, and I think that is pretty important.
I believe when she runs into him in London, he's shaved.
He's shaved, yes.
Barely recognizes him, and she's like, I thought you were a lot older. He's like, no, I think he even says an exact age, or he says, I'm in my... He
says that he's in his 20s at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, Albert is, how to describe... It's difficult to summarize their relationship, really, because again, it changes so much throughout the series.
And it's left very ambiguous at the end.
Yeah.
Well, it's, throughout... And we're gonna get to this in the story, but Candy is... she likes Albert. She's friends with Albert. She gets along really well with him. They wind up living together at some point. But at the same time, she's always like, well, I can't be in love with this guy because I'm in love with my Prince on the Hill. I've always got this.
I don't believe that she doesn't though, because she was set to marry Terry.
Well, that's true.
Terry was presented as her true love.
That's true.
They could never be together.
There's still a Team Terry out there.
Oh, there is. It's great.
Yeah, it's the entire nation of Italy, apparently.
There's like an English language forum of these women that I guess are my age.
I heard from them, yeah.
Vehement.
They were, when I wrote this Let's Anime piece on Candy, I got quite a few emails from people going, I cannot believe you wrote this. This is amazing. Or, you did a panel on Candy at an anime con? I can't believe it. Like, no, we're out there. People like Candy.
Yeah.
But yes, Albert is there, and he's very important. And I just want to point out, we were talking about her being banished to Mexico. Before she gets sent to Mexico, I think is one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, where she's framed by Neil and Eliza. I'm always on the verge of accidentally calling them Lester and Eliza. But they are very different from Lester and Eliza. They basically get found out, or Alistair and Archie and Anthony get the truth out of Neil in the end, and they're able to clear Candy's name, but it's too late. She's taken to Mexico before they can, and they think that they're never going to see her again, so they have a very appropriate response, which is to dress in full Scottish regalia and play bagpipes on the hill as she's being taken away to Mexico. You have to see this scene to believe it. It is truly incredible. A landmark moment in shoujo melodrama. Absolutely.
This is why we watch Japanese cartoons.
And the best part is that she comes back to the estate within 2 episodes, which is just like perfect. And when she comes back, that is when she is formally adopted by Grandfather William, the mysterious patriarch of the Adley family.
So just to make sure, in I guess the English titles, they call him Grandfather William?
He is Grandfather William in all the English translations I've seen. How is he referred to in the French version?
Uncle.
Uncle, yeah. He is,
sure.
Yeah, I think he's like Ooji-san in Japanese.
Uncle makes more sense because he's obviously not anyone's, well, not to give anything away, but he's not anyone's friend.
Okay, let's agree on one thing right now. We will not spoil the final episode of Candy.
That works.
You cannot know the secret of Grandfather or Uncle William unless you have watched all prior 114 episodes. Or read the 9 volumes of the manga, because the manga is much shorter.
Well, we will spoil what happens to Anthony is that he dies.
It is the first season, so.
Episode 24.
Sent to the hospital.
Flash gets sent to the hospital.
The special medical clinic 6 feet below ground. That's what happened to him.
Yes.
So that is right when Candy is thinking, my life is going great. I'm in love with this boy. He's in love with me. I've got good friends. I'm going to get out from under the thumb of Neil and Eliza. Things are going great. Wham! Suddenly things are not great.
Despite the fact that there's like a lot of very obvious foreshadowing, like the scene when they go to the fortune teller and they draw the death card. They're like, what could this possibly mean?
Yeah, what could this mean?
they really lay it on thick.
I don't want to get pedantic, but like the death card in tarot doesn't mean death.
I know it does not mean. I know it does not actually mean death.
That's how they intended it. It just always
that is how they.
When I
that
see
is
that
absolutely how they intended it in this show.
Obviously, it's always makes me crazy.
Yeah, I think the thing is though, I think that they wanted to sort of telegraph it a lot to soften the blow of when it does happen. Although it does not do that at all.
No.
And it's again, like I think as Dave mentioned, it's that scene with the horse stepping in the fox trap. It's just like, and they keep flashing back to it over and over again, and it's just, it gets you every time.
You know, someone put a trap on their hunting ground, which seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah, someone needed to get fired for that. That's like, honestly, you could have them up on charges.
Yeah. I guess it wasn't a fox trap because that's not how you hunt foxes. Because
it was a bear trap.
A bear trap, yeah. Even though, are there bears in Indiana?
Yeah, that was a question I was asked.
I don't think so. Not anymore. Not after all those traps.
I'm not sure we're hoping to catch there.
We trapped them all.
It's a plot trap. That's what it was.
So, and this is what the families all get together and say, this is a terrible tragedy. Obviously what we need to do is pack all these kids off to an English boarding school.
Yeah. Well, I think Candy does make one stop at Pony's home before going to the strictest school in all of England, and that's the theme throughout the series. Every once in a while she has to go back to Pony's home to recharge and get her bearings straight and figure out like how I'll handle the tragedies that inevitably happen after all the good things that will happen to me as my life continues.
If you feel bad, if you feel sorry for yourself, just go and hang out with some orphans, and you won't feel like you've got such a raw deal.
And climb the father tree.
You gotta climb the tree.
Yeah. And I think this is also the point where, like, one of my favorite filler episodes where that crazy rich guy tries to purchase the father tree and have it, like, dug up and moved to his property. Yeah. And then they have, like, a tree climbing contest at the end to determine who will get to keep the father tree.
I forget. Why did he even want the tree for?
I have no idea. It was a total filler episode. But it accomplished one thing, is that it makes sure that you will never forget that father tree.
You know, I'm going to say, I've seen a lot of these, you know, this is a filler. You see the episodes in a lot of long-running shows where the characters will go, wow, remember that time we first met Kenshiro? You know, in Fist of the North Star or whatever. But I want to say Candy Candy might be the first show where they actually have characters go, wow, remember that time? And then they kill a couple of minutes flashing back to a previous episode. This may be the first show that actually did that.
Well, the thing is that Candy Candy, I mean, when I say that that episode's a filler episode, I mean, it wasn't in the manga.
No, it's not in the manga, no, but they do flashback episodes.
Yeah. But what I found remarkable about Candy Candy is that despite how much longer it is than the manga, nothing really feels like filler, except for that one arc near the end. And even that's fine. Well, I mean, we'll get to that. But yeah, again, that episode reinforces the father tree, which is like, there's definitely a theme of paternalism going on in Candy Candy, and, you know, with her adoration of Grandfather William and her love of the father tree, which represents, I guess, the father figure that she couldn't have in Pony's home.
I have a theory about Pony's home, and it's just a theory, but I don't expect it's canonical in the slightest, but my feeling about the two ladies who run Pony's home is they are not nuns. They are a couple.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Miss Pony, I don't think she ever was supposed to be a nun. I think it was.
No, you only ever see the younger woman in the nun habit. I think they just set up that story so that nobody would question these two ladies running an orphanage.
That could be. I like
that. Get behind that. Yeah.
Hey, they're doing good for the community. No one's gonna.
You don't see anything particularly religious in there. Like, there's nothing to suggest that it's a Catholic orphanage, particularly.
True.
So Sister Lane is just putting on a front.
Yes. It's a little overboard, I will grant you. There are a lot of things that don't track for this theory, but that is my theory about Miss Pony and Sister Lane.
Yeah.
Sister Maria in the French version.
Of course.
Actually, on that note, it's something I didn't look into is apparently like the Quebec version and the French version have the same alternate changed names, and I don't know why that is. I didn't research hard enough. I don't know why this break happened.
The Quebec version came first. I guess they just kept that.
Maybe, yeah. They came at the same time, so I'm guessing they'll probably use the same script. Or maybe it was all just the Quebec version. I don't know. I should have. It's hard to verify this stuff from so long ago. I'm hoping someone comes and corrects me. But yeah, the strictest school in all of England, run by Sister Grey, who, going back to what I was talking about, like with Candy, like valuing the paternalistic figures in her life. There's this theme that matriarchal figures are always presented in a very negative way. With the exception of Miss Pony. We saw that with Aunt Elroy, and we see that again I can't remember the name of the school, but we see that again with Sister Grey. And it's especially funny because if I'm not mistaken, in Japanese, they have the same voice actress.
Oh.
The name of the school is St. Paul's.
St.
Paul's, yeah. You know, they talk about the school being so strict. It's really just Sister Grey. She's very nasty and very unfair, but she's also under the thumb of Terry's father. And I guess we didn't really get into Terry, who
they first meet on the boat.
They first meet on the boat, yeah.
And he's this bad boy. He's not gonna follow the rules, man.
She thinks he's
yeah.
And he wears a vampire coat.
Yeah.
He's a fop. He's kind of a fop.
He smokes. He gets into fights. But at the end of the day, he goes and relaxes on his bed with a flower hanging from his mouth because he's just mysterious like that.
He feels things.
He's
very
strong. Dramatic.
Very dramatic. He's a bad boy. Everybody loves a bad boy. So Candy and Terry kind of there's a relationship that they get into, and of course Eliza sees Terry. It's like, oh, I want that. So she sabotages everything that goes on.
Eliza's there too, of course.
Yeah, Eliza and Neil.
Eliza and Neil are there. She frames Candy, and Candy gets locked in a tower.
Something like that.
The punishment of the school is you get locked in this medieval tower. The
girl gets locked in the medieval tower.
Yeah.
They explicitly point out how for being caught being in a relationship, it is the girl who is viciously and unfairly punished.
Although she does sneak out a lot.
She does.
Yeah.
She brings her raccoon to school, by the way. She takes her pet raccoon across the Atlantic Ocean to a country where there are not raccoons.
Not a native.
Yes.
Not a native.
She wants a lot of rules.
That thing, now, I don't know how familiar you are with raccoons. You do not want one in your dorm room at school. He will destroy everything.
Yeah. Also worth noting, like, what is the lifespan of a raccoon again?
18, apparently. At least 18.
Really?
Well, I don't know. According to Candy, he's immortal because she's like 18 by the end of it, and he's still alive.
Still kicking.
2 to 3 years in the wild. So
just send me a new raccoon. The old one died. Send me a new
domestically,
one.
they can live much longer. Apparently.
Yeah, domestically they can.
They live forever.
So
I think it's closer to like 8 or 9 years. But.
In between this show and Rascal the Raccoon, Japan was raccoon crazy.
Oh my! That's probably why they put
Yeah.
Clint in there to begin with, because of the success of Rascal the Raccoon. Yeah. If you ever go to Japan, you will notice there's Rascal merchandise everywhere.
It's still a big deal.
Yeah, you can still get it.
Nobody loves a raccoon so much as people that have never had to secure their garbage from a raccoon.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, in Canada, we have a slightly different attitude towards raccoons.
Oh, look, the family of raccoons moved into the abandoned house next door. We're going to have to tear it down now.
Also at the school, she meets another friend. Oh, and when does Annie return? I think this is the point when.
Yeah, they meet up with Annie. She's going to the school as well. Yeah.
Annie is also going to the school, so she returns into Candy's life, which is it's a big moment when it happens. But then for the rest of the story, Annie, she remains one of Candy's friends. But then she also begins dating Archie, and like Archie, she just becomes a character who adds very little to the story. Archie and Annie are just kind of there from this point onwards. I mean, like you can always rely on them being there, but they just kind of stand there and don't really do anything.
They're not very interesting characters.
No.
Annie, I think they just wanted to provide some sort of resolution to the whole Annie storyline.
Yeah.
But the resolution is, I got tired of being around you because you get all the attention. Which is true, because Candy is much more interesting than Annie.
It is her show.
It's not Annie.
No.
Yeah. And we also get introduced to Candy's other friend, Patty.
Her roommate.
The girl, her roommate with the glasses. We also get introduced to one of my favorite characters, who is Patty's grandma, who has this very weird voyeuristic fixation on going to school. There's this episode where she's like kind of following them around because she wants to learn more about just being in a fancy academy, which is something that she never had an opportunity to do. And later in the episode, it just cuts to this scene with her sitting in an empty classroom wearing a school uniform. And
it's a little nutty.
I
forgot all about that.
Yeah, it is. That totally threw me for a loop when I saw that. It's like, whoa, what the fuck? This is kind of creepy. And then also Alistair, or they call him Steer, which I don't think is an actual abbreviation of Alistair. But he starts dating Patty, and they bond over the fact that they both wear glasses. That's the foundation of their relationship. Because they bump into each other, they both drop their glasses, and they just start making eyes at each other after that.
This is a show for little kids. We can't be subtle.
Well, it was more rare in the early 1900s for young people to wear glasses.
That is true.
That's true, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. Actually, when you put it that way, it just kind of makes sense. After this point, Candy is punished harshly for her relationship with Terry. I can't remember all the details of this point, but she got
framed.
Yeah, she got framed, essentially. Oh, yeah, it was Eliza. Eliza was behind it.
Yeah.
As usual.
Terry quit school.
He said, screw this.
He's a
I'm
bastard son. His mom is an American actress, and he's this lord's bastard son.
So Terry is the heck with his school. I'm going to go to America and become an actor.
An actor, yeah.
He quit school. He returns to America.
She stows away on board a ship to cross the Atlantic.
She begins her journey to find Terry in America, and this is basically half of the show.
Yeah,
is her leaving England, returning to America.
This is a really long segment, and I want to say that there's a part on the boat. She's stowed away on the boat. She winds up helping the ship's doctor. Correct me if I'm wrong. And this is when she's like,
it's before that, she's on her way to the ship to get to the dock.
Yeah.
Because she's like in the middle. They have a better sense of English geography, where it takes her a while to get to this port. So she stops at this farmhouse, and someone needs some sort of medical care, and she helps give them medical care until the doctor gets there.
And this sort of sparks in her, like, I could be a nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is also the point where she meets Cookie.
Yes.
I have to point this out. When you have a show and your main character's name is Candy, and you introduce a character who is named Cookie, I think it is reasonable to expect that Cookie is going to be of some importance in this story.
Well,
he is not. He is not important
They build it
at all.
up. It's like they mention, we're the same height. We kind of look alike.
Yeah.
And you think they're angling for, a brother, but no, he just disappears.
To some guy.
I think maybe the editor put the kibosh on it.
We have to because when you're looking at manga, like a weekly manga, we have this idea that it's all plotted out in advance, and it's like sometimes it's week by week, and the editor's like, "Where are you going with this? This is terrible. Get rid of this guy." Yeah. Or this character tested really poorly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Cookie was in the manga or not.
I believe he is.
I didn't get that far. Yeah, I think you're right. It felt like there was some kind of aborted plan with Cookie. I don't think he was going to be a love interest, because he's definitely not a shoujo love interest kind of character.
There was not.
But
yeah, it was definitely a brother type character.
Yeah. So, and then he returns once, and then he basically is never seen again, which comes off as kind of weird.
I do remember this segment of the show taking an inordinately long time. Because she's going to get
quite long.
Yeah, it's like you're going to get to this the next segment, which is when she learns to be a nurse at the Mary Jane nursing school.
But
she's going to be a nurse.
But
quite a while. It's a long time getting there. And speaking of authoritarian older female characters.
Yes.
Mary Jane,
although
Merry Jane, as they spell it.
Merry, yes. Yeah. I think you see it spelled out that way. Mary Jane, she is very harsh. Although, to her credit, unlike the other matriarchal characters we find, I think Mary Jane, she is very much trying to push Candy to her limits. She sees the potential she has in a nurse. And we're introduced to another character who I mentioned earlier, who is Franny. I found their relationship very interesting, because Franny chastises Candy constantly for being, irresponsible or being too friendly with patients or not having a serious approach. And Franny comes off as being unpleasant, but she is never actually wrong.
Yeah, she's right. She's right.
She is right about every criticism she makes with Candy. But at the same time, Candy is very good at being a nurse, and the skills that she's exhibiting are valid ways of helping patients. And it's just really interesting to see their two approaches contrast. They're both they have the same role, but they approach it in different ways, and they're equally effective. I don't think they never reconcile that directly, but it's clear to anyone watching them or observing them that they're able to learn from each other. And I think ultimately Candy learns more from Franny than Franny does from Candy. And also at this point of the story, this is where we start seeing in the background the events leading up to World War I, and Franny is the one who ultimately goes to serve on the front lines as a nurse. It's a big event for the most part, and she leaves, and we do never hear from her again after that. And I don't know if that was intentional or if she just exited the story.
I think it's because the story also took a very different tension after that.
Yes, it definitely moves away from it. And we there's well, okay, I was going to say there's no reason to hear from Franny, but the war is very much in the background right to the very end. Oh, okay, I forgot to mention, Candy did succeed in bringing her raccoon all the way over to England and to her strict private school. She drew the line at taking Clint with her to medical school.
Yes.
She does not take him into a hospital.
Yeah, a raccoon in a medical school, that's kind of unsanitary.
Yeah, she finally draws the line there. and so we do get Clint replaced with the St. Bernard dog for a little while, but they get back on track after that, and they do reunite.
Speaking of reuniting, this is where Albert shows back up.
We see Albert again. He's lost his beard. and he looks completely different. I thought we saw him a bit before as well, because he was friends with Terry.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw them in England together.
Yeah.
So he's lost his memory. He's an amnesiac.
Yeah, so
we are
we're
definitely in soap opera territory here.
We are, yeah.
And he has a skunk.
That's
he
right.
has a skunk.
Yeah,
That's right.
Skunk named Poupe.
Was he in the manga?
Yeah, the skunk was.
Yeah, the skunk was in the manga. The skunk was in the manga. Yeah.
That's also around when she reunites with Terry.
That's right.
Yeah, it takes a while before she reconnects with Terry, but this is where are they? They're in Chicago.
They're in
right?
Chicago.
Chicago, yeah. So we're in.
I'm pretty sure Terry is acting on stage in New York.
New York City. So
there's a lot of train rides.
Yeah. So she finds herself in Chicago. She encounters Albert again. Albert always seems to kind of be lurking in the background of wherever she goes, by total coincidence, of course. And she meets him again, but now he's lost his memory because he was fighting in the war. Actually, I think he was rescuing his skunk after they had both fallen off of a train, and then there was a landmine, and that caused him to lose his memory. He has amnesia for a long time.
Okay, so Terry's acting on stage. Eliza's back from Europe.
They all come back because of the war.
Everybody's back. Yeah, the war's going on, so all the kids get sent back to America because of the Zephyr raids.
Yeah, and Candy is actually caring for Albert at the hospital that she's working at. But ultimately, when he's recovered, for the most part, but he doesn't have his memories back yet. But she still feels that she needs to be there with him in order to help him regain his memories. I think they take him to that small clinic to help treat him, but ultimately, by choosing to continue supporting him, she has to end her relationship with the hospital. No, Eliza was behind her being kicked out. I can't remember.
If something bad happens, Eliza's
so many bad things happening that involve Eliza. And
I can't remember at what point, but there is a point at which Neil decides that he needs to marry Candy.
Oh yes, that's right.
The only way he can think of is to make sure that she can't get a job. So he makes sure no hospital in Chicago will hire her.
This is sort of later. This is right towards the end.
Yeah. She begins hearing news of Terry performing in New York City in Romeo and Juliet. We learn later that her journey to find Terry is really just what's driving her to find other things in life, which is like becoming a nurse, actual really important things, but finding Terry is why she came to America.
She does say, even before she leaves school, she does say that part of her decision is because he's leaving to pursue his dream, and she wants to do the same to find out what her dream is.
What her dream is, yeah. So, I mean, this is definitely all tied together in her mind. She does make her way to New York, which is, a long way away. And during this time, Susanna, who is starring opposite Terry in the play, she befalls a terrible accident.
There's a one night, everything is coming to a head. Terry is having to choose between Candy and Susanna, and right when it's looking like it's going to be Candy and Terry forever. You don't think he was going to go for it?
No, I don't think he was ever even considering Susanna. He was in love with him.
Yeah.
But he was all the way. He was going to marry Candy. They were all set to get engaged. And then Susanna saves him from getting beamed with a Klieg light, which is seen in Glass Mask, are very, very dangerous things that fall on people all the time.
Very dangerous.
Yep.
And then he still wants to go for it. And Candy's like, no, you gotta marry this woman.
Yeah. And that's a trope I find that comes back often in shoujo after that also, where you have to, the guy you want to be with, is suddenly, something happens with another girl and you have to leave him so that you can be happy with that other girl.
He's got to do the honorable thing, which is shorthand for somebody done got pregnant.
Yes.
That wouldn't have happened in this show.
Not happening in this show. I'm just saying.
Yeah. It's just emotional abuse happening.
It's emotional abuse happening.
Yeah. I'm not too sure about their relationship.
It's not great. This is one of the worst decisions Candy makes, is forcing Terry to go with.
Well, I mean, this is Terry's deal. Like he he made this
because
decision.
Candy would not be with him. She's like, no, you're beholden to her. It's a bad decision.
Oh, well, he's not going to be with Candy, but he doesn't have to take care of Susanna
No,
for the rest of her life.
He could take care of her, but he doesn't have to
Yeah, he doesn't have to marry her.
Yeah.
I want to say this whole Candy, Terry, Susanna thing, this is the emotional peak. This is the climax of the show.
Yeah.
I think. And everything else is kind of a falling action. If you want to look at it from a dramatic standpoint, you like rising action, climax, falling action, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
And it doesn't quite map out that way, but it's pretty close.
and as we kind of alluded to before, people in Italy were not happy with the outcome of this.
Oh, I think a lot
so
of people around the world. Yeah.
Yeah. It is understandably disappointing in many ways, but it's very much in the spirit of Candy. But in Italy, they apparently edited together an entire movie that tells an alternate version of the ending where Candy and Terry get together. I don't know how they managed to do that. They're just like,
oh, you could do it. No, you could do it.
I haven't seen it. I'm very curious.
We did 3 fan Space Battleship Yamato movies that were basically like that. Just taking footage and reversing it or rearranging it or, you know, otherwise messing with it.
A lot of close-ups. I think
a lot
you
of
do it with
close-ups.
a lot of close-ups.
Yeah.
Maybe we won't get too explicit about what happens in the last few episodes. I like to encourage people to watch the series.
Can we
For
tell
sure.
them? So Candy and Albert are living together in this zany animal clinic.
Zany Animal Clinic.
It's full of what's the name of that? I forget the name of the clinic. It's got a goofy name. It's like, you know, the Mary Jane School or Pony's Home. It's got a zany name.
It's not just an animal clinic. It's a clinic that will accept anyone
That's right.
regardless of species.
That's
It's
right.
human and animal clinic.
That's right.
And this is where Candy, the Ligons have blacklisted Candy from working in any school or in any hospital, because she will not marry Neil.
Any licensed
So-
medical facility.
Any licensed medical
So it's
facility.
like Blackjack. She's got to work
Yeah.
beyond the law.
But
Oh, I believe she's
technically,
Yeah. Albert does get his memory back due to a
Yeah.
car accident.
You can do a
Yes,
car accident,
that's
yes.
right.
And I also there was a filler arc where she goes off to a mining town where they're digging a tunnel, and it is the only part in this series where I would dismiss as total irrelevant.
It's filler. filler.
Yeah, it is total filler. It's still highly entertaining. I would never dream of skipping it, but yeah, that is the one portion where they're waiting for the manga. That right before around episode 100, they're waiting for the manga to finish. But we will leave it to you to watch all of Candy and discover the amazing ending that awaits you at episode 115. I don't think any of you guys have watched the show recently, but were there any specific episodes that did stand out for you?
There's one episode where she is back at Pony's home, and there's a rambunctious orphan who, for some reason, is really excited about going off to war. And Candy manages to kill an entire herd of cattle by driving them off a cliff, and then says, "That's what war is like." Which, you know, is a good thing to learn, a good lesson to learn, but a really expensive
like a
way.
rancher who is extremely poor for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it's like, that's a really expensive lesson. But it's like, holy cow. It's like, no, this is the horrors of mass warfare, kid. You don't want any part of it. Why don't you stay out of the army? But that's actually, I remember that one. That's a pretty...
Yeah. Any standouts for the rest of you guys?
I don't think I have any standout episode. I just perhaps just standout moments.
Yeah.
Well, it's a spoiler for the end, so I'm not gonna say it, but basically the end.
The end, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The final episode, like you may be able to predict some parts of that final episode, but there's at least a couple things in there that you will not see coming, and there's some good misdirection, even thematic misdirection with the way that this show treats patriarchal figures. I'll say that. One episode that blew me away in Candy was the episode with Bob, the kid who's obsessed with building graves for people.
Yeah.
So this kid is clearly, there's something wrong with this kid. His name is Bob. He has a B on his shirt, so you really know he's a little shit. And whenever he gets angry at someone, he makes a gravestone for them and writes their name on it. But they also, other kids made fun of him for not being able to read and write. So he would get angry and then he would make graves. In order to address this situation, Miss Pony and Sister Lane basically said, well, no one's going to know whose grave it is unless you write their name on it. So he got out books and figured out how to write people's, like, rest in peace, this person's name on it, and they just watched him, like, oh wow, Bob has really learned how to read and write nicely. and which I'm pretty sure is not a healthy way to deal with the situation.
At least he's learning how to read and write.
Yeah.
He absolutely did learn how to read and write. And of course he eventually does make a grave for Candy, which says, "Here lies freckled girl," which that episode, it was really something amazing. I liked it a lot. Also the weird Father Tree episode. Fun little standalone episodes that pop up now and again in Candy, which I think are really great. I was gonna ask, like, what you guys think is really what made Candy so popular around the world. I mean, was it just a matter of it being in the right place at the right time, which is, that was basically what happened with Goldorak. I mean, do you think you could say the same about Candy?
I think it's really the human drama, because you want to root for her, and you see all the sadness that follows her, and you just want her, because you're inclined to want to see her be happy.
Yeah, there's nothing else like it.
It's very compelling, like a soap opera. Like, a lot of people say, oh, I don't like soap operas, but if you watch like one episode, you suddenly find, well, I gotta find out what happens next.
Yeah.
They're really good at starting these story threads, and you have to see what happens the next episode to resolve it.
Certainly in the mid-1970s, Japanese cartoons were becoming popular, becoming pop culture all over the world. And to give, like, boys had Albator and they had Goldorak, or, wherever you were in the world, you had these shows for boys. But girls did not have a show like that, a serialized, episodic melodrama, until Candy. Really, there were not.
Yeah.
Like, that was the first shoujo anime.
I don't think there were any
really.
serialized. Yeah.
Was Georgie Girl after Candy?
Yes.
As far as I know, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we already had, like, Attack Number 1 and Aim for the Ace.
Yeah, but they're sports, right? They're not
sports,
100% melodrama. There are melodramatic elements in there, but it's primarily sports.
Yeah. And also, they're older skewing as well. I mean, like, Attack Number 1 and Aim for the Ace, they're from Margaret Magazine. That's more of a older middle school, high school kind of magazine.
Like,
Candy was Nakayoshi, which is elementary, younger, middle school. So it's a show for young girls.
Like, shoujo manga had been exploring those themes and topics, but anime had yet to catch up to that sort of.
There were tons of them in manga.
Yeah, in anime there weren't. 1975, 1976, it was strictly super robots and funny animals, And
as you might have been able to tell from the way we had to kind of piece this, the summary of Candy together, it doesn't really easily break down into story arcs. Like, the way the story threads all weave together, it's very, very organic. Everything kind of flows in, like, events flow into other events.
And it always comes back to Pony's home.
Yeah, it always comes back to Pony's home.
The waves go out, the waves come back in.
Yeah. It's, there's definitely that kind of, it's a show with a rhythm, and the rhythm is unbelievably cohesive as well. I'm kind of curious to know how the writing went with this show, because, especially with elements like the mystery that was going on in the background, it feels like there had to have been many parts of this story that were planned in advance.
For sure.
Especially when it was being adapted as an anime. It's like, how could they have done, like, especially when they're going off of this manga, it must have been extremely difficult to do that while flying by the seat of their pants.
I think they must have had the major story points. Must have known what those would be. Yeah. And I mean, there weren't any as far as I know, there weren't any major breaks in the anime. Like with Attack on Titan, they've taken like 2-3 year long breaks to let the manga catch up, because I think they really don't know where the story's going.
Yeah.
But they must have had some idea, because they don't take any kind of, like, there's the one tangent you mentioned where they let the manga catch up, where she goes to the mining town.
it's just remarkable how well this show holds itself together. I mean, also, like, production-wise, it's very cheap. This is cheap. This is cheap Toei.
It's 70s Toei TV.
But it is so consistent. It's remarkably consistent.
Yeah, I was kind of like hoping we were going to get an episode that, like, you know, sometimes occasionally with these 70s shows, you'll get like, oh, Yoshinori Kaneda worked on this episode, you know, so it looks great. And then the next episode is back to normal. But we don't get an episode like that.
No. And it never drops or the quality never like raises conspicuously, but it also never drops. Yeah. And this is despite the fact that it had 2 directors as well.
Oh, did it?
Director I believe the director changed halfway through. It was Hiroshi Shidara for the first half. He went on to do Hello Sandy Bell later. He also directed the Puss in Boots movie.
There you go.
Yeah, and Tetsuo Imazawa did the second half. He directed God Mars, Psychic Wars, and he also co-directed Kenya Boy, which is that's a movie we briefly brought up.
That is that movie is nuts.
I've heard it is. Yeah, we touched on it a little bit in our Bush Baby episode when we were talking about anime that is set in Africa. There's not a lot of it.
That'd be a good pick.
Sub-Saharan Africa, at least. Candy is definitely it's like a remarkable production, and it definitely transcends cultural boundaries in a lot of ways.
I'll tell you, there aren't many anime shows from the 70s that get mentioned in Saturday Night Live skits.
Yeah,
but Candy got mentioned.
That's right.
The J-Pop America Fun Time Now, the second skit they did.
Yes.
That skit is so funny because
it's perfect.
They get all these details about Candy correct, but Anna Faris they're talking about trying to escape from Pony's home. I'm just like, you're so close.
They read a Wikipedia.
Yeah, they read a wiki about it. No, actually, I found my notes for exactly what happened legally with Candy.
Oh, okay.
So the original deal, Mizuki and Igarashi shared the copyright on Candy with Toei. So it was 3 parties who owned Candy. In the 1990s, Igarashi unilaterally started selling Candy merchandise. This prompted Mizuki to file suit. The Tokyo District Court awarded both Mizuki and Igarashi joint custody of Candy in 1999. However, Igarashi legally challenged Toei's television stake in Candy, the effects of which were to cause Toei to place a hold on both the original show and any new Candy productions. So they're like, as long as someone's going to dispute this, we're not going to do anything with it.
So Toei's keeping it from...
I think Toei is refusing to release their old material, and they're not going to make any new material. Personally, I feel like someone's going to have to die before this logjam ends. And I know that's a terrible thing to say, but if they haven't gone to the table. On the other hand, there were times in which I felt we would never see any more Space Battleship Yamato. And suddenly we have more Space Battleship Yamato than we really can want. Yeah, someone died, right? You know?
Yeah.
So, who's to say what's going to happen?
I wonder if Toei even has the regional masters.
That's what I'm concerned about, because Toei is notoriously bad.
Yeah, they
with archiving their masters. Basically, any show that they've produced that doesn't end with Z, you'll never see it in HD because they don't hold on to like the original negatives.
I think in general it's a Japanese problem of not keeping any original of anything.
I found that like animation studios tend to be or at least production companies tend to be very good usually for maintaining for archiving that material. That's why we get Blu-ray releases for, like, there's a Blu-ray release of Attack Number 1. It looks amazing.
Wait, what?
That show
Really?
From 1969. Yeah, it looks aming. A show from 1969.
No, we've seen a lot of HD releases of some early Toei stuff, so it's not like they threw everything in the garbage.
They're mostly movies, though.
They're films. I want to say I've seen some pretty good, some of their late 60s. Yeah, on the other hand, I don't know what resolution those masters are, but some of the stuff looks pretty good. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Captain Harlock, Galaxy Express 39, Sailor Moon, like all these shows, they can't release them in HD because the masters are gone. We can get good-looking DVDs for all of them, but HD is out of the question. for all of them because they just didn't keep the masters, and it's disappointing, and like almost certainly the case with Candy Candy. But with Candy Candy, can we even rely on getting like a good quality DVD release, or DVD quality release of some kind? I'd love it if they did.
Maybe there's I'd love TV station that still has the tapes. I don't know.
Yeah.
The 16 millimeter film, yeah. Oh, that's the other problem. It's 115 reels of 16 millimeter film. It's a lot of stuff for a TV station to keep kicking around.
Would it not be on the big tapes? The, what do you call it?
I think in the 70s. I think in the 70s they were sending out film.
Oh, it was film. Okay.
Like that's how Star Blazers was sent out. It was 16 millimeter film.
Oh.
Well, let's all cross our fingers and hope that Toei can get their act together. Or, honestly, if they wanted to make a new Candy Candy, if they wanted to reboot Candy Candy and make a brand new Candy Candy series.
Oh, yeah.
Do it.
It would be like Sailor Moon Crystal.
Yeah.
They could, but they won't because they specifically said they weren't going to, so.
Well, maybe that's the final thing we'll touch on. What do you think the chances are for Candy Candy in the future? Could this be revived? Could the Candy Candy phenomenon be born again in this world?
I feel
of 2020.
I feel even without a legit DVD release, like if they just started making Candy Candy T-shirts to sell in Uniqlo, they would sell like hotcakes. There is an enormous pent up desire for candy merch.
Yeah, it's a huge legacy effect.
Yeah. There's like I said, every Japanese person my age is like, oh, I know that show. I grew up with that show. I want that. Whether it's a DVD set or watching it on streaming or buying the T-shirt or buying the manga again, whatever they can do, they'll buy.
I think as far as like current anime area right now, I don't think there's anything like Candy Candy at all. Like there's shoujo, but on the scale of Candy Candy, there's nothing like that. So it would probably do well.
Well, that's the thing. There actually isn't much shoujo being adapted into anime these days. It's pretty much all being done as live action shows now.
Yeah.
And they're usually they're older skewing. There are lots of anime targeted at young children that we don't even kind of know about here because they don't bother streaming that stuff. Candy Candy's like, it really is somewhere in the middle between that stuff, and that middle ground is disappearing in Japan just because of the changing demographics.
There aren't as many children, yeah.
Yeah.
Candy, she's not a magical girl, and it's historical, but it's not educational. It's not based on actual literature.
There's nothing fantastical about it at a time in which every other show is like, we went into the fantasy world and did a thing,
Well, even shows for little kids, it'll be like a magical girl or something like that, but not.
Maybe they'll have to make an isekai where someone enters the world of Candy Candy.
Oh, man.
Maybe that's the key right there.
And they could easily, they did those glass mask parodies. And they could easily do something like that where like a modern person is in the Candy Candy world. It's like, why is everything so dramatic? Why does this keep happening?
That would be the best.
Oh yeah, that would be.
Or as you mentioned dramas, they could make a live action Candy drama.
I'm
surprised
that
would be interesting. That'd be interesting for sure.
Done a drama for darn near everything else.
That's true.
But yeah, I really just cross your fingers and like Japan, everybody get to the negotiating table and hammer out a deal, and let's get this show back where it belongs, in the eyeballs of girls.
Yeah, I think it just takes the impetus of someone at Toei with enough power and pull who really wants it to happen. It sounds like there's just no one at Toei right now that wants to do it. Like, they could easily do it, and I think it would make a lot of money for them, and they're just like, we got Dragon Ball Z, what do we need that for? That's probably their attitude.
It's true.
I'm assuming that's probably their attitude. Because they do have some very popular licenses.
I think there may be a feeling that the crossover, like Dragon Ball, I think has some crossover appeal for boys and girls.
Oh yeah.
But Candy Candy is a girls' show. It's for girls.
Except that I'm sitting here with 3 men.
Yeah. We're not.
Admittedly, yeah.
I think, as Chris was saying, it's going to be difficult to get like an 11 or 12-year-old boy to say, oh yeah, Candy Candy, I like Candy Candy.
Yeah.
Even in this day and age, it may be difficult.
It's a fairly girly franchise, but, I don't know. maybe.
I think if you modernize it a bit, adapt it a bit, it would be easy. Because as we all say, it's a soap opera, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and everyone likes soap operas.
Yeah.
That's what Dragon Ball Z is anyway, so.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. I don't know. Something like Candy Candy, it just seems that you can't properly fit it into the molds that anime has sort of fallen into these days.
Well, I think the length is a little prohibitive because everything's like much shorter now. The cycles are much shorter, so I think that is a little problem.
Well, unfortunately, we're probably going to have to leave it there because Candy Candy, as much as we want it to, is will remain in those archives until something big happens, I think. Who knows? Maybe that's something that will await us in the 2020s is a revival of Candy Candy in some form.
Look, these people have.
It just takes a 50s-ish woman to take power at Toei. That's all it takes.
That's true. That's true.
In her 50s.
No, these creators, they all have grandkids that need to go to college. Come on, let's get it. Make a deal here. Let's make a deal.
Let's do it.
You know what? I would love to see it revived, even just the original show, because and dubbed into English, because even as old as this show, I mean, and that's a good point. Do you think that, as the show is, do you think it's something that you could get kids to watch these days at all?
I think you could. I think the manga would be a tougher sell because I have seen younger people say that the drawing style turns them off, which I don't get.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I don't get that either.
I think the manga's much better looking
love the
than
manga.
the anime.
The look of the manga is absolutely that's like one of my favorite aesthetics.
She's nailing
But
that.
I think once they get past the kind of crude if they can get past the crude animation, then I think they would absolutely get into it. But you'd have to get a couple of episodes in probably to convince anyone.
Yeah.
One thing the manga doesn't have is those great Candy reaction shots where she just goes into completely off model.
The background's all changed to that weird gassy outer space look, you know.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we're going to have to leave it there for today. Thanks, everyone, for coming on. It was a pleasure exploring this, watching this show and getting to re-explore it with you guys afterwards. Before we leave off, can everyone just share where, what you're up to and where people can find you online? Chris, do you want to go first?
So, again, I started a podcast about anisong in general. So do check that out. It's called Anisong Talk. I go to Japan often to go to concerts and everything, so I talk about that, so check it out. My Twitter is at Kurotsugi.
We're both at MrKitty.org. It's our website where we have all our various comics and where we make fun of other people's comics, and we have our podcast that comes out maybe once a year. And we also have a Mr. Kitty Patreon. And on Twitter, I am ant_Fritzy.
And I am Terabee Funhouse on Twitter. And I also write an anime blog at Let's Anime at .blogspot.com. Just Let's Anime. I've been doing that for 15 years now.
Wow.
Something like that. It's kind of ridiculous.
Long time.
No, it can't be 15 years.
And then, of course, there's Anime Hell.
Yeah, I do Anime Hell twice a year at conventions. And I show crazy stuff. Yeah, I'll be, I think the next time, Anime North coming up next May here in Toronto. So if you're in town, swing by. It's a good show.
Great. And thanks everyone for tuning in to Zun Canada. You can reach me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zunandcanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood. And you can find that at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, or whatever you want, whatever works for you. You'll find me there. And if you know anyone who might like the show, please recommend it to them. See you again.
Bye-bye.